Hello, everyone. Welcome again to our second installment of History in Exile. Last week I kind of challenged everyone, find some things that you're curious about and then just kind of study those in history. I want you to do the same thing this week. Also, just remember, take this quarantine, follow the rules, but also find some joy in it. Be kind to your family members and take care of yourself. Now listen, this kind of time frame, it reminds me, what's one of the most important things to ever happen in history? And it is true. It is the invention of this game right here, basketball. We love basketball in the United States. Seriously, right around this time, we'd be doing March Madness and going crazy with our brackets and talking about how our team is better than everyone else's team. And of course, most of us would be rooting for Duke University, and there'd be like 3 people in the entire United States rooting for Ohio State. Who knows? Someone's got to do it, right? Now listen, the season was canceled, we know. But unfortunately, we don't get to see any basketball, but we can use that time right now to study a little bit about the history of how basketball became a sport. And it all starts with this guy right here. His name is James Naismith, and he invented the sport in Springfield, Massachusetts. Now, he was going to college there at a YMCA training school to become an athletic director. And while I was there, he was given a challenge. They had a bunch of young guys who needed something to do in the wintertime between football and baseball. And, they didn't have anything to do. The normal stuff they're doing in the gym was just kind of boring. They didn't like it. And so he was challenged by his boss to come up with a game that they could play that would be rigorous. It'd be running and jumping and have them busy, but it would also be simple enough to learn, yet complex enough to keep their attention. And in about 2 weeks' time, he came up with a game that we now call basketball. If you look at this right here, Mr. Naismith is holding, are you ready for this? In one hand, a bushel basket for peaches. It's like a half bushel basket, actually. And in the other hand, he has a soccer ball. That's right. For all my friends out there who play soccer, the very, very first time basketball was ever played, it was played with a soccer ball until basketballs could be made. But those half bushel peach baskets, that's where the name basketball actually comes from. So he got 2 of these from the janitor in his building, and he actually had them nailed to the top of the balcony in the gym where they were actually going to do their work. And it's about 10 feet from the bottom of the gym up to the top of the balcony. 10 feet, 10 feet. This is where we get traditional heights for basketball. All right. On top of that, he came up with 13 rules of basketball. We have the actual typewritten document he made in 1891. Here it is right here. Look at this. There are a lot of important documents in history, people. There's Hammurabi's Code of Law. There's the Magna Carta, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the 13 rules of basketball according to James Naismith. That's right. You're looking upon greatness here. Breathe it in with me. Breathe it in. Now listen, the rules were a little different than they were now. For example, his first team he ever played basketball with, he had 18 guys in the class, and so he had them break into 2 groups of 9. So basketball was initially played with 9 players on a side. And then when they throw the ball up into the basket, there was no hole cut in the bottom, so the ball didn't fall through. That's not going to come till later, when they'll replace the basket with an iron ring and a net. And then eventually they'll cut a hole in that. And in 1895, they'll even add a backboard. What do you know? Making progress. So listen, this game really caught on. The first time he played it, though, you got to understand the guys were kind of pretty rambunctious about it. But when it was all said and done, they liked it, and he refined the rules, and you got a game that was useful, and people seemed to really appeal to it. It was great on an indoor court when you couldn't play outside. In fact, by the late 1890s, even ladies were playing this game, and they really loved it too. It was good for both genders, and back then, that's a big deal. Women didn't have a lot of opportunities in sport. So anyways, after he invented the game, it caught on and went to a lot of other YMCA schools. People liked it, started to spread nationwide and even internationally. And you started to have colleges playing it, and eventually high schools played it. Now this picture down here, this is James Naismith up here with his first college basketball team. This is from the University of Kansas. And this is kind of a funny story. He was the coach at Kansas. He was actually the athletic director too. But he was the coach of the basketball team, and he had one of the few coaches out of the University of Kansas to have a losing record. He was 55-60. But give the guy a break. He also, often in these games, was also the referee. He would literally travel with the team, then he would referee the games. And I think it's probably a statement to his character that his losing record kind of gives testament to the fact that he was probably a very honest referee. So the game really caught on. And to be honest, throughout his entire life, he spent some time evolving the rules of the game. We went from 9 people down to 5 people, changes in things from dribbling, the addition of certain things like lines on the court, things that make the game, more similar to what we know today. Like I said before, women caught on to this sport. It was one of the few sports that ladies could actually do, and they found it really enjoyable. Though it was odd, back then they kind of wanted to limit the running that women would do. They thought it was too strenuous, which is ridiculous, I know, but back then that was the thought. And so they were limited to stay on either end of the court, and they would divide them into 3 zones, and you really didn't move around. You dribble 3 times, pass, and that was about it. Right? But you know what? Women liked it. It caught on, and this is actually a picture of the very first women's basketball team out of Berkeley. And they played the very first women's college basketball game against Stanford. And this is the team, and they won, of course. There you go. Now, this is kind of interesting here. This is 1939. This is the very first NCAA March Madness tournament. And this is championship game between Oregon and Ohio State. Would you like to know who won? It was not Ohio State. It was Oregon with a score of 19-8. Now that's a really low score, but back then, the scoring wasn't as high as it is today. Things have changed in the game according to the rules and some of the tactics that we play with. Listen, by 1936, basketball had become an official Olympic game. Naismith was still alive. He got to see this game from his invention of it all the way up to an NCAA March Madness tournament, all the way up to an Olympic sport. And he actually traveled with the team in 1936. This is the Berlin Olympics in Germany, Hitler's Olympics. It's one of the most interesting things to study in sports. So Jesse Owens was there. It's an amazing, amazing historical event. And the United States basketball team, they won this game, all right? They beat everyone in the world for the first time in basketball, and Naismith was there to present them with their medals. It's a really great story, all right? Now, as a side note here, Naismith dies in 1939, okay? But here's the catch. Before he died, there was a guy that lived pretty close to Springfield, Massachusetts, when he was still in Springfield, Massachusetts, a little earlier. But this guy was William G. Morgan. You can see him down here. William G. Morgan was actually a YMCA guy in kind of a school and establishment down the road from Springfield, Massachusetts. And he was trained up by Naismith. And Naismith gave him a challenge. His challenge was to come up with a game that wasn't as much running as basketball, wasn't quite as rigorous to that degree, but still had a lot of cardio, a lot of up and down, was still competitive. And Mr. Morgan took that challenge, and he invented the game of volleyball. That's right, there's a connection between basketball and volleyball via Naismith. So if you really think about it, 2 of our favorite sports, volleyball and basketball, come through the intelligence and just sheer fun of a guy named James Naismith who wanted to create something for us to do in the wintertime when we couldn't get outside and play football and baseball. Well, there you go. There's the brief history of basketball. Now listen, here's what my challenge is for you this week. I want you to find a sport that you really enjoy, whether it's cross country, whether it's baseball, whether it's football, whether it's, full contact croquet. You find the thing that you like to do, and I want you to go explore the history of it. I want you to find out how it originated. Where did it come from? What other sports did it pull from? And then let that be your guide. Let the curiosity drive your education right now in these interesting times. Be well out there. We'll talk to you soon.